The beach is not advised here in the short term. We've got a series of systems that are going to keep things churned up and are also going to keep things rainy. We take a look at Seattle. Right now, we've got some peaks of sunshine out there. You know, plenty of clouds, but things later this week and into the weekend, that's when they really go downhill in terms of more rain, more clouds, and less outside time. Here's your Seattle forecast. Friday, rain is likely. Widespread rain. This is more of a washout day. Same for Saturday. By Sunday, I think scattered rain showers, decent bit of coverage, still a pretty rainy end to your weekend. Monday, we drop the chances. I think at this point, it's more few and far between for the showers, but expect a decent bit of cloud cover. And maybe Tuesday, we finally see some sunshine peeking out. Total forecast. So you look at a forecast like that and you go, I guess we're going to get a lot of rain. You are 3 to 5 inches likely from northwest parts of California through western Oregon and into western Washington. Plenty of 2 to 3, 1 to 2 inch amounts. And then we've, of course, got the high elevation snow to watch for. In fact, some of these snowfall totals will be in the order of feet across sections of Washington and Oregon. Interior parts of the west, so the Intermountain West, that's where we're going to see plenty of 5 to 8, 8 to 12 inch amounts. Some spots could get locally higher totals. Forecast looks like this. You know, moving through the day on Thursday, we're really going to start to see that rain closing in on the Pacific Northwest. So lurking off the coast. Here's Friday at lunchtime. You can see Oregon coastline, Washington coastline. You're going to be dealing with plenty of rain, and that extends into places like Portland and Seattle. Saturday, we keep it going. Sunday, we keep it going. So quite a bit of coverage into the western part of those states for the Dr. Knapp. It's still a pretty uncertain forecast as well. You know, we look at our forecast models. The spaghetti models looks more like a ball of yarn, honestly, with some, you know, everybody kind of staying close until they splay out in different directions. So still a lot of uncertainties, but obviously some major islands in play.
Yeah, some scenarios are really bad for Hispaniola and or Jamaica. Some are still very bad.
Right.
I mean, there's not a whole lot of good scenarios with a slow-moving system. In the next 2 to 3 days, though, until the weekend, Alex, the big question is how much will it be steered toward Hispaniola versus how much will it be sheared and not move very much. Right now, definitely not moving very much, and it's definitely sheared as you see all the thunderstorms on the east side, the heavy thunderstorms at that, but the low-level center's over by you.
Yeah, so we've got a system that's being pulled in a few directions that you've said is responsible for the slow motion and at least the temporarily sustained development in terms of intensification.
Yeah, so the shear will stay strong enough to keep the intensity similar to what it is now until the weekend. See, the low-level flows this way, the mid-level flow is this way, the upper-level flows that way, so it's really battling against wind shear. Now, once the wind shear lets up, and if it's still over water this weekend instead of over Hispaniola, then the sea surface temperatures are super warm. The warm water goes to a significant depth. This is the most fuel-loaded part of the Atlantic Basin right now.
So short term, we're probably looking at a storm that stays fairly similar. But this weekend, conditions become much more favorable for not just, you know, strengthening, but perhaps rapid. You know, everybody's going, can this rapidly intensify? Could we see this thing really take off?
It very well could once this big trough on the eastern coast of the U.S. moves out of the way, because then what happens is, Alex, once you get past this next couple of days where it's either being sheared in this area or steered toward Hispaniola, which is still an outside shot, then you get to this weekend, that trough goes away, it's not being sheared anymore, and it's being steered more in this direction. That's when, with that westward motion over the warm waters with weak shear, that's when the Hurricane Center shows it becoming a hurricane this weekend and a major at some point in a consistent manner with most of the models. So the big question, though, is, Alex, how far north will it get? How close will it get to Jamaica and Hispaniola while it is meandering around this area for up to the next week?
Right. And then if we are looking at a system dumping huge amounts of rain, perhaps bringing some really strong winds, this could be devastating, a slow-moving storm like that.
Even without the storm or the hurricane making landfall in Hispaniola or Jamaica, this could be disastrous wind and water.
We'll get much more. Well, extreme weather has cost America a shocking amount in the first 6 months of the year, $101.4 billion to be exact. And that's without a landfalling hurricane. This map shows the 14 costliest disasters from January through June 2025, covered in the latest $1 billion disasters report. It's a report now being compiled by Climate Central after the federal government stopped tracking the data earlier this year. Our senior national correspondent Justin Michaels breaks down the numbers. So we want to bring in, our expert, Dr. Knabb, to talk about some of these, really notorious hurricanes, each moving very slowly. Well, at least Harvey and Dorian moving very slowly. And then the terrain enhancement of Helene, which, while it moved quick, it dumped a lot of rain and it dumped it over areas with mountains.
And I think it's a valid question and a thought to think that could Melissa have aspects of all of those hurricanes and be a really bad hurricane for the Caribbean?
Yeah, perhaps, because again, as we bring in Dr. Knabb, we've got the potential really historic rain or just absolutely, to the point that we can't even, show it, represent it properly with our color scheme. Then we've got terrain in these islands. And do we have a slow moving high end hurricane as well, like what we had with Dorian?
Yeah, so just to put this all in perspective for those of us here in the U.S. who have been through a lot of these systems, I'm going to make the case that Melissa has the potential in the Caribbean to be Harvey and Dorian and Helene combined. All the worst aspects of those systems. Just start with what Harvey did in Texas. We're talking about a tropical storm over relatively could be life-threatening for the Caribbean.
Maybe the only difference here is that Houston was a major metropolitan area, right? Would there be large metropolitan areas in Hispaniola you'd be worried about, or do you think it will affect less population?
No, the Port-au-Prince in Haiti, Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, Kingston in Jamaica. These are all on the southern side of those islands that are going to get onshore flow and are in the lower spots. So, metro areas, even if they didn't have the mountains around them, would be at risk. So that is one part about Melissa that concerns us. Now, when you consider Dorian, how it was a stalled hurricane
Sat over that those communities for an extended period of time. And when we were talking about, in the case of Dorian, Category 5 winds, Melissa, forecast to get to Cat 4. Could it get to Cat 5? Maybe. Could we be looking at that affecting one of these or multiple island nations?
Yeah. Now, the Bahamas don't have the mountains.
Right.
So if you take the worst of Harvey, slow-moving tropical storm, and the worst of Dorian, an island nation dealing with a hurricane that stalls over them. And then you add aspects of Helene, which was moving along, as you mentioned. But even while it was moving along, the mountains squeezed out so much rainfall that was in the multiple feet, more than 2 feet locally. That was a disaster, and it wasn't something in Hispaniola or Jamaica.
Yeah, I mean, we think about how hard it was, as you point out, to get resources there to western North Carolina because of how cut off you became with the landslides and the devastating flooding. If we see that on an island, worst case scenario.
Yeah, so imagine if the Appalachians were out on an island and Helene stalled over them for several days. That's what we're talking about, the potential in the Caribbean.
Obviously, that could